I want to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Satish Gopal to this particular webinar. Um, we have been for some time having the cancer lecture series to educate and to increase the academic footprint in terms of cancer in Africa. And then COVID hit and we've had to change direction on a number of fronts. And for a while we had stopped the cancer lecture series. And now that there is some sense of normality that we're getting back to, we felt it's important to get back. So we're really honored and delighted that for the year, having the first cancer lecture series, that we are delighted to have a very accomplished global oncology fellow, a very well recognized international individual who's also spent a wealth of time in Africa and who knows, the scenarios that we face in Africa, the issues around cancer, the problems around equity, the disparities, and the obstacles that many of the patients face in Africa. So really, there's no other person that I think that's well positioned to speak on global oncology than Dr. Gopal that we have today. So a little about Dr. Gopal. He's joined the National Cancer Institute as Director of the Center for Global Health in February 2020. But prior to that, he has spent quite a long period of time in Africa as a medical oncologist. He has spent time in Tanzania, but also a long period of time in Malawi through his affiliation with the University of North Carolina, Project Malawi, where he's worked in collaboration with the Malawi Ministry of Health. And he's also been undertaking a number of projects through collaboration with the AIDS Malignancy Consortium, through which I've had the opportunity to meet him through our collaborations with the AIDS Malignancy Consortium. So Dr. Gopal, he has a master's in public health. He's also completed his medical degree at Duke University School of Medicine. And then he went on to do his training in internal medicine and pediatrics at the University of Michigan. And he's certified in medical oncology, and he's been focused on oncology ever since. So as I mentioned to you earlier on, having worked in Africa for a long time, and he's been an advocate for global oncology. It's an area that I know he's passionate about, and having had his feet on the ground in Malawi, in Tanzania, knowing firsthand the issues that Africans face when it comes to cancer, and now heading up the Center for Global Health at the NCI, and many of us know the commitment that the NIH has to worldwide activities in research and cancer research. I think that Dr. Gopal is well placed to be with us today and to give us his views on global oncology, where he sees the current scenario. Is it getting any better? Is it stagnated? Has there been improvements? And from the from an institutional perspective that he heads at the moment, what are his views in terms of the future planning, and where does he see this discipline actually moving forward, so that actually we can take lessons from his experience. Also, so welcome, Dr. Gopal, and we really look forward to hearing your views and your thoughts, so that we can help mobilize, and we can help to set a roadmap going forward to see how within the African continent we can continue to move forward on the work that you've been doing, and also improve on what needs to be done to safeguard and to sort of improve on the capacity issues and on the infrastructure issues that are so needed in Africa. Also, I want to take this opportunity to welcome Professor Jackson Oram, who has agreed to moderate the session. Professor Oram is also a trained clinical oncologist and a specialist in hematology and oncology. He is an honorary lecturer at Makerere University, but also the executive director at the Uganda Cancer Institute. Professor Oram is also an extraordinary professor at the African Cancer Institute, and he also has committed himself very extensively to teaching on the Master of Philosophy in Cancer Science, which is one of our flagship programs at the Institute. So Professor Oram, welcome to you as well, and thank you very much for kindly agreeing to moderate this particular session. So Dr. Gopal, thank you once again, and I believe that you have 30 minutes to present your talk entitled Global Oncology, and we look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks so much, M.P.H. It's great to see you and great to see Jackson, and I think you both are as much authorities on this topic as I am, but I think it'll be nice to talk a little bit about how we're thinking about this at the NCI over the next 20 to 30 minutes, and then I do hope that we'll have some time for discussion. So let me share my screen, and I'll just presume that this is working unless I hear otherwise, so please do tell me if you're not able to see anything.
So that's great. We're able to see your screen.
Great. Let's move it. Okay. So again, thank you again. I'll try to speak for 20 to 30 minutes or so about global oncology. That's of course an enormous topic. I think many of you are as capable of discussing this topic with this audience, but I think it may be useful for you to hear a little bit about how we're thinking about this at the NCI currently. And again, I'm really looking forward to discussion with all of you once I have a chance to go through my initial comments. So as M.P.H. mentioned, before coming to being recruited to the NCI a year and a half ago, all of my academic life was spent living and working in sub-Saharan Africa as an oncologist, first in Tanzania and then in Malawi. So it's always nice to be able to speak to a primarily African audience. I think I'm deeply familiar with, many of the issues that some of you face on a daily basis. I think this experience is certainly helping to inform a lot of the ways that the perspective that I'm trying to bring to the NCI currently. I always like to use the opportunity as well to just thank all of you. I'm a person who really would not have a career if it were not for the generosity of African institutions and colleagues and collaborators and communities, who embraced me and my family and allowed us to live and work in various parts across the region. And this was a deeply meaningful experience for me professionally and also for my family personally. I often say I continue to miss this. I'm living in Tanzania and Malawi on a daily basis, and hopefully at some point might be able to return to the work I was doing before. And I think this was so meaningful. I'm not really going to talk a lot about what I did before coming to the NCI. I think it's probably more valuable for you all to hear a little bit about how we're thinking about this now at the National Cancer Institute. So I'll just suffice it with this one slide. I think the work that we did in Tanzania and Malawi was really important for us in a variety of different dimensions. I think we truly became better people. This is my older daughter who will be starting high school next year, but she was 6 months old when we first moved to Tanzania. And again, I think having the opportunity to live and work alongside colleagues like yourselves, I think has been an incredibly valuable experience for all of us. We were able to take care of patients in the public sector National Teaching Hospital in Lilongwe, and that was incredibly an important experience for me. We had the opportunity to discover new diseases, and I have discover in quotation marks. I think we were among the first in sub-Saharan Africa to deeply characterize multicentric Castleman disease, for example, which I think is a really emerging comorbidity in the HIV treatment era. We worked to try to improve outcomes. So when I first came to Malawi, CHOP, for example, was the institutional standard for treatment of Burkitt lymphoma in adolescents and young adults. And we, I think, collected data to understand that really the outcomes were not very good using that approach. And so over time, we were able to make incremental adjustments and improve outcomes, which was very meaningful for us and for patients. We had the opportunity to elucidate cancer biology, for example, doing gene expression profile studies of HIV-associated lymphoma, which had not really been done on a large scale internationally. I think we made important contributions to infrastructure. This is a weekly telepathology conference that we ran between colleagues in Malawi and the US. This is very similar to a conference that I now join at the NCI within the lymphoid malignancies branch. I think we gradually improved scientific culture. I think Jackson was at this meeting. We had an HIV-associated malignancies meeting supported by the NCI that allowed us to bring together senior and junior investigators from the US and Sub-Saharan Africa, all working on similar topics, to network, exchange ideas, present some of their work. And I think that really helped to contribute to a scientific culture in Malawi. We supported early careers. This is Temiwe Tamoka, who's the first Malawian pathologist and a breast cancer investigator working within our program. This is her presenting her study to Francis Collins, the director of the NIH. So again, a deeply meaningful experience for her and the type of catalytic career development opportunities that we tried to provide for investigators wherever possible. And then there was this really nice pipeline that emerged of young talent, both from the Malawian side and also from the US side. And I think, we thought a lot about how to construct teams, how to construct them equitably, how to take advantage of all of these young people who were really interested in greater equity in cancer research worldwide. And so, again, just to speak to this prior experience in one slide, I think this was deeply meaningful in a number of different ways. But I don't do that any longer. Now I work at the National Cancer Institute. So the NCI was established by the National Cancer Institute Act of 1937, and in our current form by the National Cancer Act of 1971. The mission of the NCI is to lead, conduct, and support cancer research across the nation to advance scientific knowledge and help all people live longer, healthier lives. Our current fiscal year budget is $6.56 billion US dollars, so we're the largest funder of cancer research in the world. And the Center for Global Health is shown here. So I like to just point out that we are one part of a big complex organization. And really global health activity, we're one of the younger parts of the organization, and global health activity was occurring before the Center for Global Health was established. And it also is not confined to the Center for Global Health. So we really try to act as a global health hub for the NCI. We have our own programs that we move forward that are largely focused on low and middle income countries, which are underrepresented in the NCI portfolio overall, we believe. And then we try to facilitate and support global health work that's going on across the Institute. So this is an excerpt from the National Cancer Act of 1971, and I won't read it. Shown at right is President Richard Nixon signing the original legislation, which again did not create the NCI, but really created the NCI in its current form. And what I like to remind people is that, again, there's a long history of cancer research and control internationally at the NCI, and actually the language in the legislation of the National Cancer Act of 1971 explicitly mandated that the NCI engage in global cancer research and control. And you can see the original language from the law is shown here. Something just happened. It looks like I was kicked out of sharing. Let me try to share again. So I'll presume that the slides are okay, but please let me know if they're not. So this is the 50th anniversary of the National Cancer Act of 1971, and throughout the year, the NCI is working with the broader cancer research community to really commemorate how important this legislation has been in accelerating progress for cancer patients. The Act created the Cancer Centers program, for example, in the US, which has been immensely important in bringing cutting-edge cancer research to communities. And it happens to coincide with the 10th anniversary of the Center for Global Health, which was established in 2011. And so we've really been trying to use these simultaneous anniversaries as an opportunity to highlight some of the important global health history of the NCI, and also think kind of about how we might continue to frame global health activities going forward. And so it's really given us a year-long opportunity to commemorate and celebrate global health at NCI. And we've tried to do that in a number of ways. We've initiated a new cancer research and control seminar series with some amazing speakers. Most recently, we had Professor Pramesh from Tata Memorial Hospital speaking about the National Cancer Grid in India. We've tried to connect with key global health thought leaders around where global cancer research and control are. Most recently, I spoke with Harold Varmus, and I think had a really nice conversation. He was the NCI director at the time that the Center for Global Health was created. It was his decision to create a dedicated Center for Global Health at the NCI. And so we had an opportunity to connect around some of the reasoning behind why a dedicated Center for Global Health was felt to be necessary at NCI in 2011, and also what some of the opportunities may be going forward. We've tried to have a social media campaign throughout the year that I think has been very effective in highlighting a lot of the work across the NCI that's ongoing related to global health. And you can find details about all of this on our website. So for those of you who are interested, I'll at the end, I'll have the website as well as our Twitter account. So I'd encourage you to follow us if you are interested in getting some of the content. I also want to remind people that, of course, the global health history of NCI is long, including in Africa, and this is just a couple of examples. So this is the United States Surgeon General's Bulletin from 1962, which describes the NIH collaborating with the Ghanaian National Institute of Health and Medical Research to establish a West Africa research unit. And this is Gerald Meyer, who was an NIH investigator with his family, getting ready to move to Accra to help oversee this new unit. This is a press release from 1967, which describes the establishment of a collaboration between the NIH and Makerere University in Kampala. Much of this collaboration, these types of collaborations certainly contributed to the eventual development of the Uganda Cancer Institute, which Jackson now leads. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the work related to Burkitt lymphoma that followed from these types of arrangements. As I mentioned, the Center for Global Health itself was created in 2011, and so global health activity preceded the establishment of a Center for Global Health at NCI. But again, there was enough critical mass, opportunity, need that in 2011, Dr. Varmus, as the NCI director, felt that this needs to be concentrated and coordinated in a dedicated center. And so in 2011, they created this CGH. They wrote in this article about their reasons for creating CGH and said, we've established CGH to develop an appropriate research strategy to help incorporate cancer control into global health programs, foster relevant research throughout the NCI extramural and intramural divisions, and work closely with many potential collaborators who've displayed an interest in shared objectives. Certainly we at CGH even now are very connected to this original vision, and I had an opportunity to kind of explore this at length with Dr. Varmus recently in our conversation. But we have also been thinking about, in the last 10 years, how the field has evolved. Are there, how should we adjust our approach going forward, and are there new opportunities that we might be able to realize? And the current NCI director, Dr. Sharpless, and I have articulated kind of a refreshed vision, I think, for CGH in this recent article, which some of you may be interested in. And this really builds on work that we've been doing over the last year to develop a new strategic plan for CGH, which again is available on our website, which I'll talk about in a little bit of detail. And so we really think, in 2011, a lot of the effort was on establishment of a center and integrating cancer control into global health more broadly, given that I think the global health community more broadly did not often think about cancer as a key public health concern worldwide. I think we're in a different place in 2021. I think this establishment has already occurred, and I think the integration has already occurred. And so I think now we're really thinking about evolution and prioritization. So we need to think about what should the strategy be going forward. We also need to make cancer a priority. That is, it no longer should just be integrated, but I think we believe really should be a priority in global health going forward. We've also had a lot of opportunity to engage with other parts of US government around President Biden's exhortation to end cancer as we know it. And of course, we often have an opportunity to say that we should not be ending cancer as we know it just for some people, but this really requires a global viewpoint. A lot of that is because LMICs are where cancer burden will be concentrated. And I know this is well known to this audience, but just to say it explicitly, By 2040, 69% of global cancer deaths will occur in LMICs. This is even without considering effects that COVID may be having on disruption of cancer research and control worldwide, which of course I'm sure you all are feeling in South Africa, just as all countries are. And it's also based solely on demographic changes. That is, you assume that age standardized cancer-specific incidence rates remain the same and then apply them to a growing and aging population. But the reality is that incidence rates are also increasing, particularly in many LMICs, as opposed to high-income countries where incidence rates are generally declining. And so, if anything, this may actually be an underestimate. And what you can see if you compare the 2020 estimates in terms of burden shown in the open circles and the 2040 estimates, the biggest proportional increases are in the lowest income countries. So for example, the lowest income countries will experience a near doubling of cancer burden between 2020 and 2040, and that's in health systems that are obviously already clearly overstretched. And so this is something we have to be aware of. And I often say, I think there's a moral obligation to address this at the NCI. I also think there's a scientific obligation to address this at the NCI. That is, in 2040, 6% of cancer deaths will occur in the US. So we are, it's an extremely restricted scientific landscape if you're only studying 6% of the world's cancer. And I think there's a general understanding of that. And so finding, ways in which we can fulfill this moral and scientific obligation is something that we're thinking a lot about. Just to put this in context, in 2020, this equated to approximately 27,000 global cancer deaths per day. And that is compared with approximately 10,500 global COVID deaths per day currently, according to data that I pulled from the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation yesterday. So that isn't to say that cancer is more important than COVID. Arguably, we won't be able to address cancer unless we first address COVID. But COVID, I often say is a rapidly enlarging fire that is enlarging over days to weeks. Whereas cancer is a slowly enlarging fire that is enlarging over weeks to months to years, and so to even decades. And I think that's something that we have to be mindful of. That of course we have to deal with COVID, but certainly shifting, losing focus on some of these other pressing and urgent global public health concerns, I think, is also not advisable. And then COVID is, of course, superimposed on a history of global cancer successes. I think some very important successes, some failures, and also inequity. And I try to summarize all of that in this one slide because it's closely related to my own work. I primarily did clinical translational studies of lymphoid malignancies during the period that I was living in sub-Saharan Africa. And so Burkitt, I think, lymphoma speaks to, I think, both success, failure, and inequity quite compellingly. So we spoke already about these initial NCI collaborations with the Uganda Cancer Institute, which Jackson now leads. Of course, this all followed from the discovery or the description of Burkitt lymphoma by Dennis Burkitt in 1958. That then led to the discovery of Epstein-Barr virus in 1964. John Ziegler, who was a senior investigator in the pediatric oncology branch at the NCI, then moved to Kampala and worked with colleagues in Uganda to learn from the treatment experience there and then apply that back to United States patients. So this is a New England Journal of Medicine paper from 1977, in which he's describing achieving similar treatment results in American patients compared to the African experience, which is really remarkable, actually, to think that the flow of knowledge was actually in the completely opposite direction to the way that we think of it normally now. And I'm not suggesting that we should think of it as unidirectionally as we always do currently. That led to the MYC discovery, so this discovery of a new human oncogene. More recently, that has been accompanied by comprehensive molecular characterization of Burkitt lymphoma and the elucidation of clearly different biology based on whether or not EBV is present in the tumors. All of this biologic insight has been translated into continued therapeutic optimization such that for children or adults enrolled in clinical trials in the United States receiving contemporary therapy, the outcomes are really remarkable. I mean, nearly uniform survival. But I often say that we've failed to complete the last step, I think, in this otherwise very beautiful circle of discovery, that is deploying a broadly curative solution back to the very African children who helped to initiate these decades of discovery. And I say this because I think you all are probably familiar with this as well. During the time that I spent living in Tanzania and Malawi, we routinely saw children who presented just as Dennis Burkitt had seen them in the 1950s and 1960s, and who had approximately the same outcomes. And so again, what we are very interested in now is how do we develop a scientific agenda that is really focused on this final arrow and delivering science back to the patients and communities that need science most. This is the NCI extramural global portfolio in 2020. So you can see that approximately 13% of all grants that were given to outside groups had an international component. Most of that is foreign component awards. That is, the award is made to a US institution, and it includes a collaborating site internationally. A much smaller proportion are direct international awards. Again, we at the Center for Global Health have a big interest in trying to increase the proportion of awards that are made directly to international institutions. This is showing the distribution across the common scientific codes, across cancer sites. So you can see that there's pretty good distribution across the spectrum and across cancer sites. And this has grown over time. So if you look at the last 10 years, again, roughly contemporaneous with the existence of a dedicated Center for Global Health at the NCI, in 2010, approximately 9% of extramural awards included an international component, and that has increased to 13% most recently in 2020, which is the most recent data that we have. The proportion of direct international awards to international institutions has remained quite low and quite small. And again, we have a lot of interest in trying to increase that proportion currently, but overall, I would say the international engagement of the NCI has grown, and that's a good thing. Here is shown the geographic representation, so there's pretty good worldwide distribution across WHO regions. This is showing the income status. So again, for us at the Center for Global Health, most of our focus is on low and middle income countries, which are relatively underrepresented in the NCI portfolio. You can see that a lot of the international collaboration is with other high income countries. And this is showing the country breakdown. So again, South Africa very well represented among LMICs specifically. And this is intramural projects. So these are now NCI scientists doing their own work rather than grants made to external scientists. There are two intramural divisions at the NCI. One is the Center for Cancer Research. The other is the Division of Cancer Epidemiology and Genetics. I have an intramural appointment in the lymphoid malignancies branch of the Center for Cancer Research, where I continue to try to engage in some clinical and translational studies focused on lymphoid malignancies. Again, there's good geographic distribution across the world, and you can see that again, DCEG has a specific interest in cancer etiology, so that is very highly represented in their projects, which is not surprising given their focus. And again, there's a range of cancer types that are being studied by NCI intramural scientists in collaboration with their international partners. This is a Sub-Saharan Africa portfolio. So between 2016 and 2020, nearly 200 projects, both extramurally and intramurally. This is showing the geographic distribution. Again, South Africa, not surprisingly, because there's such strong research institutions, such a strong academic culture, that South Africa is very well represented within Sub-Saharan Africa generally. And then this is the Sub-Saharan Africa extramural portfolio, which again, there's representation across the continuum of cancer research, from biology to cancer control, survivorship, and outcomes research. Fairly good representation across cancer sites, with some obvious predominant cancers, including cervical cancer, KS. This is non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Your own institution is very well represented, along with institutions in Uganda and other South African institutions. And again, I think this would be no surprise to you, given the rich academic environment that you all have created. So just talk a little bit about what we're thinking at the Center for Global Health, and then wrap up, and really look forward to a conversation with all of you. So as I mentioned, over the last year, we've been working with external partners with our own staff, with NCI leaderships, with other US government partners, to revitalize the strategic plan for the Center for Global Health. So as I mentioned, the NCI mission is to lead, conduct, and support cancer research across the nation to advance scientific knowledge and help all people live longer, healthier lives. Our mission at the Center for Global Health is to support the NCI mission by advancing global cancer research and by coordinating NCI engagement in global cancer control. We hope to see reduced worldwide cancer suffering through global scientific discovery and dissemination, and our values that are really animate everything that we do are impact, equity, and collaboration. And our strategic plan is publicly available, by the way, on our website. And so I'd invite all of you to, if you're interested, to have a look and give us feedback on, what you think we should be thinking about. These are our primary goal areas. And again, for us at the Center for Global Health, our primary focus is really on low and middle income countries for programs that we are leading. We play a more support and facilitating capacity for international work in other parts of the NCI that doesn't have as exclusive an LMIC focus. But our first goal is to support research, to support innovative, impactful research that is addressing key scientific issues in global cancer control or leveraging unique or unusual scientific opportunities afforded by collaboration with global partners. We hope to support cancer research training that enables equitable, impactful global scientific collaboration. We have a dissemination goal, which is to promote the integration of current scientific knowledge into global cancer control policies and practice. And then we represent the NCI and promote its engagement with key partners in global cancer research and control. These are our primary research themes, and I've shown some programs. I think some of these areas are more well developed than others. I think we have an actively developing portfolio in each of these areas, which I don't have time to go into in a lot of detail today. But we're very interested in accelerating technology development for global cancer control, accelerating global cancer implementation science, understanding and addressing global cancer health disparities, increasing support for cancer clinical trials and LMICs, and then continuing to increase understanding of cancer etiology and biology through global collaboration. And rather than being encyclopedic in the interest of time, I just wanted to give a couple of illustrations of the types of research that we support at the Center for Global Health. So we have a program, I mentioned technologies. We have a program called the Affordable Cancer Technologies Program. Several of our grantees through that program have been working on the development of portable thermocoagulator device. I don't think I need to speak to this audience about the challenges of implementing liquid nitrogen cryotherapy in rural African clinics, which is a non-workable solution and really inhibits our ability to achieve the third pillar of the WHO cervical cancer elimination targets. And that, for that reason, I think it's been quite important that some of these novel thermocoagulator devices have been developed. I think they still need additional testing and validation and refinement, but several of our grantees were able to present data from work that they were doing to test and develop these devices to the WHO, which were rapidly taken up into the guidelines for pre-cancer treatment. And so again, this is the type of thing that we support and would like to continue supporting. And this year, we reissued the next phase of the Affordable Cancer Technology Program and are really excited to see what type of work continues to be supported through that effort. Another example is through the Global Alliance for Chronic Diseases, which is a consortium of international funders, we, together with many other funders, are supporting an international study to evaluate a clean cook stove intervention in its reduction of household air pollution. The main outcomes of that study are focused on infant growth and development and pneumonia, but we have provided support for the assessment of cancer-associated biomarkers as a secondary outcome in this large international multi-center trial, which is due to report out, I think, later this year, and they've already demonstrated preliminary data showing that the intervention at least did result in health-relevant reductions in particulate matter inhaled. For research training, just a couple of things to highlight. We are interested in supporting institutions develop capacity for global cancer research. We have a new NCI-specific, cancer-specific D43 program. Historically, D43s have resided at Fogarty, but we felt there was a critical mass of need and opportunity related to cancer that we should initiate our own D43 program. We've recently made the first set of awards, as shown here at the bottom. The next cohort are anticipated to be funded, I think, in early 2022. Together with the Fogarty International Center, we support Young Investigator Awards both for US and LMIC scientists who are interested in cancer research careers in LMICs. And then we have some shorter term experiential training opportunities, both for the intramural and the extramural communities. And those are shown here. And just as an example, the short-term scientist exchange program recently helped to support collaboration between investigators in India and investigators at the NCI working on cellular therapy, and that allowed for the development of CAR T platforms within India, as shown here at upper right. We have a number of dissemination platforms: the International Cancer Control Partnership, the International Cancer Screening Network, the WHO Collaborating Center. So we provide scientific support for WHO from NCI as it's needed to move their own cancer-specific programs forward. We host an annual symposium on global cancer research together with numerous partners. I hope many of you will consider attending next spring. This is the International Cancer Control Partnership, which we helped to found and continue to support and coordinate, but it really allows multilateral partners to, so when countries are developing national cancer control plans, they can solicit advice, technical expertise from this organization as they're developing, implementing, and evaluating their national cancer control plans, which I think many countries have found to be very useful. In the partnership realm, we have a few things just to mention. We have the International Cancer Research Partnership. We work very closely with the NCI designated cancer centers to try to incentivize and document the growth of global oncology activities at the cancer centers. We support international agreements on behalf of NCI, and most recently have been working very closely with Aortic. So this is the International Cancer Research Partnership. This is a group of international funders. Again, the NCI helped to found this organization that harmonize and share data about what they're funding such that it's publicly available. We estimate that this covers approximately 60% of cancer research funding in the world currently. There's a very active effort to increase the representation of additional cancer research funders, including funding agencies in LMICs. And so this may be a resource that's of interest to all of you. And then similarly with Aortic, Aortic has asked us to help sit on the scientific planning committee for this year's meeting, as Aortic has identified sessions that are of interest to the Aortic membership where we could provide some support in development of a session. At NCI, we've tried to identify the right people at NCI. This effort is overall coordinated by our center, CGH, and so we're really excited about Aortic. I think it will give us the opportunity to really learn from the community in some of the areas that we're thinking about how we might design specific programs to move them forward. And I really look forward to interacting with many of you, hopefully at Aortic. So for a South African audience, I thought it would be appropriate to end with one of my favorite Nelson Mandela quotes, who I think is an inspiration for a lot of us. And I think, honestly, I think this type of thinking really animates a lot of what we're thinking about at the Center for Global Health currently in relation to global cancer research and control. So this is our website, our CGH Twitter handle, and then my personal official Twitter handle. And I encourage you to find out more through these channels. So that's it. I did want to leave some time for questions, which I thought was as important as my talk. Questions and discussion, I should say. So I'll stop there and look forward to any thoughts that Jackson or Vikash or the group may have. Thanks again for the invitation.
So thank you very much, Satish, for that very, very enlightening talk about what you have done as a researcher and as an oncologist in Africa, and your work currently at the NCI. I'm sure the our participants in this webinar have been enthused by the content. So thank you very much for that, and I will now hand over to Jackson, who will now moderate the session. So Jackson, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vikash, for this opportunity. And I want also to take this chance really to applaud Satish for a fantastic run through the cancer issues from the perspective of the Center for Global Health. From my point of view, from the Uganda Cancer Institute, I would imagine that what you are stating is very true, that the practice of global oncology predates actually the establishment of the Center for Global Health. To me, it looks like the National Cancer Institute has been doing this without realizing it, or without before having a global health or global oncology, for that matter, as a subject. The establishment of the Uganda Cancer Institute in 1967 probably was really a landmark in as far as the start of global oncology is concerned. And just as you presented, you know, the presence of people like John Ziegler, who came all the way to Africa to study Burkitt lymphoma, is an example. And then secondly, I'm so glad that you had a conversation with Harold Vamos, because it's very interesting that in 2011, when he was actually thinking about how to establish the Center for Global Health, he paid a visit at Kampala. He was at the Uganda Cancer Institute, and we had an amazing discussion about, you know, all these and question about what the Center for Global Health would eventually actually accomplish. And I'm so happy that, you know, after now 10 years, it's a robust center being headed by none other than Satish. And I really consider Satish really a trailblazer as far as some of these things are concerned. So we need to really congratulate you for that. Regarding the support that the Center for Global Health is providing, I can speak from the perspective of the Uganda Cancer Institute that we have been working very closely with your team, working on development of National Cancer Control Program. Actually, we are now, I would say, pretty much being supported in the final phase of doing that. And we are doing a program, I think, for the whole of next year, trying to walk through the progress we have made in developing our own National Cancer Control Program. So I would want to say it's not all research for the Center for Global Health, but also looking at cancer control from perspective of, you know, trying to share technology as well as know-how. So with that, I think it's time for questions. So I don't know whether there are any in the audience who would want to ask Satish some few questions to respond to. I see hands up for Kage. You have the floor.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the presentation. I'm Ashraf Kaji in the Department of Psychology at Stellenbosch University. It was a very interesting talk. What I noticed, however, was the absence of any mention of mental health, psychosocial oncology, and I wondered to what extent this is on the agenda of this work, because there's very little psychosocial work on in oncology in sub-Saharan Africa, and there are things like common mental disorders, end-of-life care, mood disturbance, anxiety, quality of life, health behaviors, etc. Even cancer control, which has behavioral correlates. And I wonder if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent point. I think it is an area that we're thinking quite actively about. Even now, speaking to my work in Malawi, you know, we were very eager to test, you know, develop and validate, for example, patient-reported outcome instruments in the local context, so we could really understand patient experiences over the course of their, you know, from diagnosis to treatment to even afterwards. Similarly, now I think we have, you know, a couple of areas that touch on some of the topics that you raise are that we have been interested in as cancer-associated stigma as well as survivorship issues. So we have this year actually have had a couple of supplement funding opportunities that have been designed to really stimulate rigorous research in those areas in low and middle income countries. We were really pleased with the response that received from the community. We're excited to at least begin some pilot work in that area, and I think are, we'll use that experience to inform what we might do subsequently. The other thing perhaps to say is that actually yesterday, the National Institute for Mental Health at the NIH, which of course is the dedicated institute that deals with mental health, also has a new global health director, and he and I met yesterday for the first time. He started a couple of months ago, and so we are very eager to explore what types of collaboration opportunities there may be with that specific institute, which would also speak to some of the areas that you've highlighted in your question.
Thank you.
So we're thinking about a lot, doing some, but I think it's still kind of at a developmental stage, I would say.
I can't agree more. I think that is an area which requires emphasis. There is a niche that people have been talking about, but I don't see the implementation being robustly followed. That is psycho-oncology. I think that is the area where this would actually fit very nicely. They need to develop those type of areas in Africa, in addition to the emphasis in palliative care, hospice care, and then the psychosocial aspect has not been well developed. And I think that may be an area that the Center for Global Oncology may need to look at. Any other questions? I don't see any hands up.
So,
All right. Yes, Professor Vikash.
yes. So, Satish, one of the other aspects that we've been thinking about is that I always say that in Africa there is a lot of data, and we continuously thinking of more and more innovative projects and moving forward. But I always say that there's a wealth of data that have been collected, as rudimentary as it may be, through paper-based files and so forth. So moving forward in terms of big data, more efficient ways of collecting them and tapping into other systems to looking at other health systems and just sort of making the data amenable to big data science and so forth, but just setting up the structures sort of in smaller ways so that people on the ground are able to collect information more efficiently, so that they get into database systems that could be sort of accessed and sort of analyzed more efficiently, more timelessly, in real time. Sometimes I think that we sort of leave a lot of this behind, and we move on to the more high-end research, whereas a lot of this, what some may term as rudimentary, but it's in actual fact, a lot of the real issues, problems or solutions could be found in the data that's already collected. But it's just that it's an issue of mining that information that could inform a lot of our cancer control plans, or or health systems issues that perhaps we have not been able to mine efficiently in the past, that we maybe can do now, that we have much better ways of analyzing larger data. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think generally I agree. I think so I think we're trying to get away from this like high-end research versus low-end research. I mean, I don't think that serves anyone particularly well. We think that discovery is important, and we think that dissemination is also important, and those are equally important things. I don't believe that we currently have the tools for global cancer control, and so I think developing new tools is essential. And the thermocoagulation example is even if you articulate 90, 70, 90 goals, if you're trying to get the last 90 with liquid nitrogen cryotherapy, it is not achievable in my view. So you need better, and similarly with screening methods, VIA is probably not going to be the mainstay of that middle 70 pillar, and so we need better technologies. I also think there are also technologies that work very well and aren't getting implemented. They're not getting implemented in the communities that need them most. And so I think that's why, technology development, implementation science, those are areas that we have highlighted. Certainly, I think for implementation science, routinely collected data is important, I think, to guide that. And I think we're having a lot of discussions about how we might support that, who the right partners would be. An obvious partner would be IARC, for example, because they have historically been the major supporter of cancer registration internationally, including in sub-Saharan Africa. So we're having ongoing discussions with the surveillance team at IARC about what might be possible. Again, I think we probably can't replicate a SEER-like structure in sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, SEER in the United States is an amazing effort that makes routinely collected data available for the research community, and it's a really important resource, but it's incredibly labor and intensive as well as financially. And I think there's, as you say, I think there's probably kind of novel, more context appropriate ways that we can achieve some of the same things in a way that would be more appropriate. But we fundamentally agree, and I think we're engaged with conversations with various partners about how we might accomplish this. I think in some ways, these sorts of publicly available data resources are actually most important for young investigators, because I think when people are coming up, it's really useful to have a resource. If you have a question, you can't, as a young investigator, fund a cohort for 10 years that will help you answer that question. I think particularly for people getting started, I think it's really important for them to have robust data sources that they can go to generate some of that, early experience asking and answering questions. So I view this as integral to our implementation science efforts. I also view this as, to some extent, as integral to our global cancer research training efforts. I don't think we have extreme clarity on how we would achieve this, but we're certainly engaged in those discussions now.
Yeah, I think I agree entirely with the sentiment that Vikash has just brought. I would actually ask for emphasis on also the other aspect of the health systems, because in as far as cancer is concerned, that is very, very weak, especially in Africa. Now, I guess in the other low middle income countries as well. And I would also ask that Center for Global Health should take interest. There is actually a new Lancet commission that is going to look at cancer and health system, and the emphasis is going to be on international. So it will be good also to have like the Center for Global Health having a role there. I just wanted to let you know about that.
Yes, thank you for that. And there's questions in the chat as well, Jackson. There's one question. I think, Satish, you've presented a slide on the funding in different countries and LMICs, and the question was, is China likely to lose the LMIC status due to the growing economy?
Oh yeah, that is from somebody, Mary
Chamberlain, yes.
Yes, Mary Chamberlain.
Yeah, so that's an easy one. Obviously, we don't classify countries at the NCI. The World Bank does that, and we just follow their classification. That's the. I think it's right. I mean, certainly, I think in many respects, Chinese investigators can do everything that the United States investigators can do, and it's common to see, new CAR-T products developed in China being presented at ASH and ASCO. So I think this is a fair question, but we just operate in the context of the larger US-China relationship and follow World Bank classifications as per country income status.
I think there is also another question from Amanda asking about interprofessional collaboration with the allied health professionals. I think trying to bring the element of a multidisciplinary kind of arrangements. I don't know whether that can also work in the context of global health.
Yeah, I think it can always work. I mean, I think for the funding opportunities that we always encourage. To be too prescriptive, though, to necessarily say you have to include these people or these people. I mean, often, we are asking the investigator community in LMICs to identify a problem that they think they can solve, how they would solve it. We think that multidisciplinarity is often important for some of these solutions, and it's, for example, there's no reason that a rehabilitation focused training program couldn't be, it's really for the community to decide. I mean, many of our areas of interest and even funding opportunities are somewhat broadly thematic, so for example, survivorship or implementation science. I think there's no reason that physical medicine rehabilitation couldn't be incorporated into some of those ideas if it was felt to be necessary in your local context. Clearly, cancer is a multidisciplinary disease, and I think we certainly understand that, and I think there's a real need to engage many different disciplines to address this problem in LMICs, as you've highlighted. I think you're on mute, Jackson.
I don't see any more questions coming up. So at this point, let me hand over back to Vikash for any administrative announcements before we close down.
Yes, thank you very much, Jackson. So once again, thank you very much, Satish, for an excellent presentation. And I think the content of your presentation has given many food for thought. And no doubt, I think the information in the last slide will be valuable, and I'm sure many of the participants in this webinar and the staff members that have asked questions and some of the board members of the ACI as well, they will certainly be reaching out and taking advantage of the opportunities that lie ahead. And also, the Consortium of Universities for Global Health will also be having their meeting next year, the regional meeting next year, which will be held at Stellenbosch University. So I'm really looking forward to having a cancer component addressing cancer in the region. So that's in prep at the moment. So I will certainly be reaching out to colleagues like yourselves and Jackson as well, so that we bring topics that are key to the development of the region in terms of this discipline. And also there'll be a few days that we'll have the opportunity to look at what possible short courses that we could render prior to the meeting as well. So we will have plenty of time to talk about that. So there are a number of opportunities on the horizon. But once again, thank you very much to yourself, Satish, to Jackson. You're always ever so willing to engage with us at the ACI and to put in time and effort, and we really appreciative of all the hard work that you do. And to all the participants that have joined as well, thank you all for coming online. As I said, this is it will be an ongoing a monthly engagement, and next month we have a panel of experts who will be engaging on the topic of cervical cancer. There'll be a panel of 3 experts, well-known international experts who will be engaging on cervical cancer, and Dr. Yuri Munsami, who's our scientific officer at the ACI, who's really, this is her project, and she'll be reaching out to all of you and sending out invites and so forth. So on behalf of the ACI, thank you all very much, and do have a pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Goodbye. Goodbye.